What if I told you that the greatest warning to humanity was buried, silenced, and forgotten? Not by accident, but because it was too dangerous to be heard. This is the voice of Carl Jung, resurrected through his own words, ideas, and prophecies. Not a conspiracy, not fiction, but a message that has echoed in silence for decades, waiting for a moment like this, when the world is once again on the edge of something irreversible. They never wanted this interview to see the light of day. It wasn't filmed. It wasn't broadcast. But the ideas were real. The warning was real. Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And now, we're about to uncover why that avoidance could destroy everything. Imagine Jung sitting across from you in that iconic calm but penetrating tone. You ask him, "Dr. Jung, what is the greatest danger you see for the future of mankind?" He looks at you, pauses, then replies slowly, "The loss of the inner world. The soul has been exiled. The machines are loud. The screens are bright. But the spirit is starving." His words weren't designed to scare you. They were designed to wake you up. He warned us that modern man is no longer connected to himself, that we live outside of our nature, that we become obsessed with objects, with progress, with material wealth, and in that chase, we've amputated the very thing that makes us human, our relationship to the unconscious mind. Man cannot stand a meaningless life, Jung said, and when meaning is lost, we compensate. With distraction, with addiction, with control, and when those don't work, we project our inner chaos onto the world. That's when war begins. That's when societies collapse. That's when tyrants rise. Jung didn't just study the individual. He studied the soul of civilization. He believed that nations go mad the same way individuals do, through repression, denial, and fear. He saw the rise of ideologies not just as political phenomena, but as psychological epidemics. He said, the bigger the crowd, the more negligible the individual becomes. And in that loss of individuality, we lose consciousness. We become sleepwalkers. We obey, we consume, we conform, and we forget who we are. In this so-called banned interview, you ask him, what happens when humanity ignores the unconscious mind? He leans forward and answers. It doesn't go away. It retaliates. The shadow becomes stronger. The more you push it away, the more power it gains. And then, it takes over. What is this shadow Jung speaks of? It is everything we refuse to look at in ourselves. The hate, the fear, the envy, the guilt. We push it down. Society tells us it's ugly. Religion tells us it's sinful. But the truth is, without integrating that darkness, we are incomplete. The world, Jung said, doesn't need more moral preaching. It needs more self-awareness. Because only self-awareness transforms the beast within. He once said, the world hangs by a thin thread, and that thread is the psyche of man. Can you feel the weight of that? Not the economy, not technology, not the military, the psyche. If our inner world collapses, everything else follows. And right now, we are dangerously close. You ask him, what do you mean by that? How is the inner world collapsing? He explains it like this. We are no longer initiated into adulthood. We do not pass through the fire of inner transformation. We are overgrown children, dressed in the uniforms of adults, playing with powerful tools we don't understand. Nuclear weapons, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence. These are Promethean forces, but we have not earned them through wisdom. We have not tamed our egos, and without humility, power always turns to destruction. Jung believed that the 21st century would either be a time of collective awakening or mass psychological regression, and he feared the latter was more likely. Why? Because it is easier. Easier to blame, easier to hate, easier to drown in distraction. But every time we choose ease over consciousness, we become more divided, more lost, more vulnerable to manipulation. In this interview, he is calm, not apocalyptic, but firm. The greatest danger is not an external enemy, he says. It is the enemy within. And until man confronts himself, truly, courageously, he will remain his own worst threat. You ask, is there hope? And he smiles just slightly. Of course, but it is not hope through salvation from above. It is not a political savior, not a new ideology, not even a religious revival. The hope is in the individual. One person at a time, waking up, facing their shadow, reconnecting with their soul. That's where the miracle lies. At this point, there's a strange silence. Not in the interview, but in your own mind. You realize he's not just talking about society. He's talking about you, your own dreams you've ignored, the emotions you've suppressed, the childhood wounds you never healed, the rage you never voiced, the grief you buried so deep you forgot it was there. He's telling you, until you face those things, you are not truly free. He said, freedom is not doing what you want. It is becoming who you truly are. This is not a TED talk. This is not a motivational speech. This is not a feel-good moment. This is a wake-up call. Jung's message was clear. If we do not reconnect with the unconscious, both personally and collectively, we will destroy ourselves. And here's the terrifying part. He predicted this decades ago. Before social media, before AI, before deepfakes, mass surveillance, algorithmic control. He said that technology would advance faster than our consciousness, and if that happened, the imbalance would rupture the world. And now, here we are. In part 2 of this conversation, Jung will reveal what he called the psychic epidemic that is spreading across the modern world, how it disguises itself, how it manipulates, and how to protect yourself from its grip. But for now, sit with this question. Have you met your shadow, or are you still running from it? Because as Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. You sit there, still absorbing Jung's last words. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. It doesn't just echo, it haunts. It follows you beyond the room. Because now you start to realize, most of your life has been orchestrated by forces within you that you never dared to confront. You turn to him again, and you ask, Dr. Jung, if the unconscious is this powerful, how does it take control of society? His answer comes with chilling clarity. It begins subtly, a discomfort, a fear, a denial. These are the first symptoms of what I called a psychic epidemic. You see, unlike a physical disease, a psychic epidemic infects the minds of people. Their thoughts, their beliefs, their behaviors. It spreads through suggestion, through fear, through the desperate desire for identity and belonging. He pauses. The weight of the silence is loud. People begin to abandon their individuality, he says. They merge into groups. They surrender personal responsibility. They begin to act not as humans, but as masses. In that mass identity, they become susceptible to ideologies, to propaganda, to collective madness. And that, he says slowly, is how the unconscious swallows the world. You can feel it happening now in our world. Online mobs, cult-like followings, narratives repeated until they become truth, no matter how false. People screaming for justice, not knowing they are serving someone else's design. You see, Jung wasn't just describing the 20th century. He was forecasting the 21st. A time where the shadow no longer hides in the individual, but is projected en masse onto politicians, onto the other side, onto entire systems. And every time we say, they are the enemy, without examining ourselves, the shadow grows stronger. You ask him, but how does someone know when they're infected? He looks straight into your eyes. The infected person is often the last to know. The first symptom, he says, is certainty. When a person believes they are absolutely right, and anyone who disagrees is evil or ignorant, that is not clarity. That is possession. He leans back, letting the words settle. The more emotionally charged the belief, the more likely it stems from the unconscious. You start reviewing your own convictions. What beliefs have you clung to with emotional fury? What ideas have you refused to question because they make you feel safe, righteous, or superior? He continues, the unconscious loves disguise. It wants to hide in plain sight, and its favorite costume is moral superiority. That is how evil often enters the world, not as chaos, but as virtue. You think of history, of movements that claim to fight for truth, for purity, for justice, only to descend into censorship, tyranny, and genocide. And it hits you. This is not ancient history. It is a cycle. One that begins in the psyche, festers in the collective, and then erupts in reality. You ask, what's the antidote then? How do we protect ourselves from this? He smiles faintly. The antidote is inner work. Deep, honest, and often painful inner work. Most people don't want that. They want quick answers. They want to fix the world without fixing themselves. But there is no lasting change outside until there is transformation inside. Then, his tone shifts. He says something that feels almost like a whisper across time. When you feel hatred, pause. When you feel the urge to attack, to blame, to destroy, pause. Ask yourself, what part of me am I seeing in the other? Because the shadow always appears first in others, before we're ready to admit it lives in us. You begin to understand that this interview isn't an academic conversation. It's a confrontation with yourself. You are not just listening to Carl Jung. You are being initiated by him into a deeper kind of truth. One that the modern world is not built to handle. One that makes comfort impossible. You ask him about modern technology, social media, algorithms, constant distraction. Are these helping or hurting our ability to evolve? He doesn't even hesitate. They are amplifiers, he says, not creators. They magnify what is already within. If the individual is unconscious, the machine becomes a weapon. If the individual is self-aware, the machine becomes a tool. Technology itself is not the problem. The psyche behind the technology is. And now the image is clear. We are children playing with fire, uploading our projections, broadcasting our wounds, liking our own madness, sharing our collective shadow disguised as entertainment, politics, or even spirituality. You asked him one more question in this part of the conversation. Why do people fear the unconscious so much? He pauses for a long time before answering. Because it requires you to die before you die, he says. The ego must surrender. The mask must fall. The lies we tell ourselves must be faced. That is terrifying. But it is the only path to true liberation. Most people will do anything to avoid that. They will stay busy. They will get high. They will chase money, love, status, anything that distracts them from looking within. His voice softens, but the soul waits, always, silently, until the pain becomes unbearable, or the hunger for truth becomes greater than the fear of change. The room feels still, like something holy just passed through it, because you realize Jung's warning is not about a coming disaster. It's about the disaster already unfolding inside each of us. A spiritual drought, a crisis of meaning, a disconnection from who we really are. And the question is no longer, what will happen to the world? The question is, will I wake up before it's too late? Because as Jung warned, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams? Who looks inside awakes. In the next part of this unseen interview, Jung will explore how modern civilization unconsciously creates its own destroyers, and why the people most celebrated in our society are often the most fragmented inside. But for now, he leaves you with a final thought. Do not waste your suffering. It is the call of the soul, the invitation to go inward. And when you accept that invitation, everything changes. You feel it now, not just intellectually, but in your bones. This isn't a lesson. It's a reckoning. Jung's words are not mere philosophies. They're mirror shards, and each one cuts through your illusions. He leans in slightly and speaks in a tone that's both quiet and forceful. Modern civilization is proud of its progress, its skyscrapers, its science, its technology. But it is dangerously unaware of its inner poverty. What you call advancement on the outside is often compensation for what is crumbling within. You think about the obsession with productivity, the glorification of wealth, the cult of fame. We chase these things as if they will complete us, as if they will fix something broken inside, but Jung sees through it all. The more disconnected a person is from their soul, he says, the more they will seek validation from the outside world. This is why your celebrities, your influencers, your power figures, they often become empty vessels. They project success, but inwardly, they are disintegrating. You ask, why does society reward those who are fragmented? He nods, as if expecting that question. Because the fragmented person is easy to manipulate. They are hungry for approval, addicted to applause, terrified of rejection. That makes them loyal to the system, not to themselves. You don't need to imprison someone whose self-worth depends on others. They'll build the cage for you, and thank you for it. You feel a lump in your throat. You think about people you admire. You think about yourself. How often have you abandoned your truth to be liked, to be accepted, to feel safe? Jung continues, the danger is that such people become idols. They are admired, envied, even imitated. But what is being imitated is not wholeness. It is performance. It is an image without soul. He pauses, then adds, and when you worship the mask, you lose the face beneath it. You look at your own life now, the masks you wear to fit in, the roles you play to be seen, the emotions you suppress to keep the peace, and it hits you. The world doesn't need more successful people, it needs more real ones. You ask, what happens when we abandon our authenticity for approval? Jung's answer is immediate. You betray the self, and when the self is betrayed long enough, the unconscious begins to rebel. It sends dreams. It sends anxiety. It sends depression. And if those are ignored, it sends chaos. He leans back, hands folded. Every neurosis is a signal, a message from the soul that something vital has been lost. You realize now that your pain is not your enemy. It's a language, one that speaks in symptoms, in patterns, in recurring emotional storms. And Jung is urging you to stop running from it. Until you confront your suffering, he says, you will inflict it on others. That is the great secret of unconscious pain. It doesn't stay hidden. It leaks into relationships, into parenting, into politics, into the world. You take a breath, because this is no longer about abstract theory. It's about real life. You think of people who are deeply wounded, walking around looking fine, even admired, yet leaking pain onto everyone they touch. Not because they're evil, but because they're asleep. Jung is quiet now. The silence feels sacred. Then he says something unexpected. Your greatest enemy is not the darkness. It's distraction. You blink. Distraction. Yes, distraction from yourself, from your fear, from your shadow, from your calling. The modern world is a machine of distraction. News, noise, screens, arguments, content. All to keep you from sitting still long enough to hear your soul. His words ring louder than any shout, because you know it's true. Every time you've been about to face something important, your phone buzzed. A video auto-played. A notification offered you relief from the moment. Distraction is the new sedative, and like any drug, it keeps you from the truth. Jung continues, and this is the root of the warning I've spoken about. Not bombs, not wars, not pandemics, but the loss of soul. When the soul is abandoned, people become hollow. And hollow people, when gathered in mass, become dangerous. You ask, dangerous how? He looks into you now, as if weighing your readiness. Because hollow people seek meaning in extremism, in ideologies, in enemies. They turn to rage because it gives them a false sense of aliveness. But it's not true life. It's the last scream of a starving spirit. You think about the world, the tribalism, the shouting, the moral crusades, the thirst for someone to blame. It's not just politics. It's deeper. It's the unconscious howling through empty hearts. You whisper, is there still hope? And Jung, without hesitation, says, yes, always. He smiles gently. The soul is never fully lost, only forgotten. And even now, in the chaos, people are awakening. They are dreaming different dreams. They are choosing silence over noise, depth over distraction, truth over comfort. That is the beginning. You sit back, stunned. This interview, this conversation, it's not about Carl Jung. It's about you. About everyone who dares to listen beyond the noise. About the few who still believe in healing over hatred, in awareness over reaction, in soul over image. He stands now. His presence somehow larger. Not physically, but energetically. You are not here to fix the world, he says. You are here to become whole. And in doing so, you offer the world something it has forgotten exists. A conscious human being. The wave that lands like thunder. Not as pressure, but as purpose. Jung's final words in this part linger in the room like incense. Do your shadow work. Face your pain. Tell the truth. Love with your whole heart. And when the world seems mad, don't follow. Stay rooted. Stay awake. That, my friend, is rebellion. That is revolution. You don't move. Not right away. It feels as if time itself has paused, giving you a moment to truly absorb what was just said. Carl Jung isn't giving you advice. He's handing you a torch. A light to carry into a dark and distracted world. But before you can speak, he turns and says, almost as a whisper, there is something I must tell you now. Something most people were not ready to hear back then. And I wonder if the world is ready now. You nod without speaking. Something in your spirit knows. What he's about to share next may change everything. Jung looks into the space beyond you, as though speaking to a time that hasn't arrived yet. The psyche is not just personal. It is collective. And that means when one person goes mad, it is a tragedy. But when a society denies its shadow, it becomes possessed. Possessed. The word slices through the air like a knife. Possessed by what? You ask, already afraid you know the answer. He continues slowly, as if measuring every syllable. By archetypes. By unconscious forces that have been denied and suppressed for too long. Forces that live in every human heart. Greed, fear, lust for control. These are not evil in themselves. But when they are exiled, they return with vengeance. And they do not whisper, they scream. You think of mass movements, blind obedience, hysteria on both ends of every spectrum. People abandoning reason and rushing into extremes, fueled not by clarity, but by unhealed wounds. Jung nods again, reading your silence. This is why your modern world, in its attempt to banish myth and spirit, is in more danger than it realizes. When you deny the sacred, it does not disappear. It goes underground. And there, it festers. The chill runs deeper now, because it's not hard to see what he's saying. People are turning to false gods, ideologies, conspiracies, fanatic causes. Not because they are evil, but because they are starving for meaning. And Jung warns, in the absence of the sacred, the shadow takes the throne. He speaks now of totalitarian regimes, of how entire nations can be overtaken by unconscious energies when people surrender their inner truth for safety, identity, or belonging. This, he says, is the psychology of mass possession. And if you do not recognize it, you will be consumed by it. You want to ask how to stop it, how to break the spell. But Jung answers before you even form the words. It begins with one soul that refuses to lie, one heart that won't hate even when it's easy, one mind that chooses truth over comfort. That's all it takes to begin a reversal. His eyes are clear, unshakable. You must do the work others refuse to do. You must feel what others numb. Speak what others fear. Forgive where others seek vengeance. That is how you become a channel, not a container. The pain flows through you, but it does not take root. You realize now what he means. A conscious person doesn't carry the collective shadow. They transmute it. They don't just survive the madness, they become alchemists of it. You are not here to escape the darkness, he says. You are here to illuminate it. It's not a call for perfection. It's a call for presence. He tells you that every age has its challenge. And this one, our current world, is facing what he once predicted long ago. Not a war of weapons, but of meaning. A crisis of consciousness. An emergency of soul. In the future, Jung says, people will not starve for food, they will starve for purpose. You feel that in your own life. The emptiness you sometimes filled with distractions, relationships, or achievements. The subtle ache that something was missing, even when everything looked right from the outside. That ache, Jung says, is your invitation. You look at him. Invitation to what? To go inward. To retrieve what the world told you to forget. Your soul. He reminds you that your soul is not just a poetic idea. It is real. It is the deepest part of you. The part that cannot be bought, faked, or destroyed. And the world you live in, as brilliant as it may seem, is engineered to disconnect you from it. Why? You ask. Why would the world do that? His voice drops. Because a person who knows their soul cannot be controlled. You let that settle in. He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't need to. You think of how school systems condition conformity. How advertising manipulates your sense of lack. How media cycles keep you anxious. How algorithms feed you anger. It's not a conspiracy. It's just how the system survives. And the price is your authentic self. But Jung offers no bitterness, only clarity. The task, he says, is to become so conscious, so fully alive, that even your presence disrupts the unconscious patterns around you. Not with violence, not with ego, but with stillness, with truth. You imagine that. A world where people walk into rooms and bring peace. Where one soul, rooted in presence, can change the entire atmosphere. That is power. Not the loud kind, the eternal kind. But it won't be easy. Jung warns you again. As you awaken, the world may reject you, because your very being reminds others of what they've forgotten. You ask, what should I do when that happens? His answer is simple, but sharp. Stay awake, stay kind, and keep walking. Because awakening isn't a destination, it's a direction. And Jung makes it clear, the work is not to be perfect. Not to be above pain or above the world. The work is to stay human in a world that's forgotten how. He places his hand on the table, almost ceremonially, and says, you must remember this. The most revolutionary act in a world gone mad is to feel. The words linger. They strike something ancient within you, the part of you that still dreams, that still weeps, that still hopes. Feeling is not weakness. It's resistance. It's remembering that you are not a machine. And maybe, just maybe, that's what will save us. You sit in silence, heart pounding, the air around you still heavy with the weight of his words. Jung looks at you, not with judgment, not with superiority, but with an almost fatherly compassion. As if he knows the burden he's just handed you. as if he knows how hard it will be. And yet, how necessary. I don't tell you this to frighten you, he says quietly. I tell you this because it is your task. You who are drawn to the truth, you are being called. Called. The word echoes in your mind like the tolling of a distant bell. He continues, the old structures are crumbling. The masks are falling. What once held the world together, systems, roles, identities, is dissolving. And this is not the end. It is the beginning. You feel that. Deep down, you've always known that something wasn't sustainable. That the way humanity has been living, disconnected from nature, from soul, from each other, could not last forever. Jung affirms it now. We are not just in a crisis of politics or economics. We are in a crisis of meaning. And when people lose meaning, they don't just suffer. They seek out substitutes. Some find comfort in control, others in chaos. Some cling to dogma, others drown in nihilism. But the solution, Jung says, is neither. The solution is integration. To heal the world, he says, you must first heal the split within yourself. Not by choosing light over darkness, but by uniting them. Your shadow, he explains, holds the very power you need to step into your purpose. The rage you suppressed may contain your courage. The sadness you hide may carry your empathy. The fear you deny may be the door to your transformation. You want to look away from these things. You want to stay in the light, where it's safe and clean. But Jung won't let you. He knows the cost of avoiding your own death. He leans in. The longer you reject parts of yourself, the more power they will have over you. Not because they are evil, but because they have been exiled. And what we exile always returns. He pauses, then says something you weren't ready for. This is not just about your personal healing. This is about the world. Because every person who integrates their shadow weakens the collective darkness. It clicks. Healing yourself is not selfish. It is sacred rebellion. You are not just helping yourself. You are becoming a beacon for others who are lost in the fog. Every wound you transform becomes a lantern. Every truth you speak becomes a bridge. Every tear you honor becomes a seed of empathy in a world starving for it. Do you understand now? Jung asks. You nod slowly. Yes, but it's overwhelming. He smiles gently. Of course it is. You're being asked to walk between worlds, to be a bridge. A bridge between light and dark, between the unconscious and the awakened, between what the world was and what it's becoming. You asked him the question that's been burning in your mind since this began. What if I'm not strong enough? And he answers without hesitation, then stay soft. You don't expect that, but it cuts straight to the core. In this world, Jung says, you've been taught that strength means control. But that is an illusion. Real strength is openness. Real strength is staying tender when you have every reason to harden. You feel something break open in your chest. Your tears do not make you weak. They make you ready. He leans back and speaks with quiet certainty. You are not here to save the world. You are here to awaken within it. And in doing so, you will help others remember what they are. You remember a line you once read, maybe even from Jung himself. The world will ask you who you are. And if you do not know, the world will tell you. But now, you know. You are not the role you play, not your status, your job, your trauma, or even your story. You are something far more ancient, a soul traveling through time, a witness, a carrier of wisdom your ancestors could only dream of. You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to ignite. Jung's final words fall like a blessing. Trust what is rising in you, even if the world does not understand it, especially then. For what is rising in you is the future. The space around you shifts. Something unseen but undeniable opens, like a veil lifting. Not outside you, but inside. You feel it now. The warning was never just about the dangers of the external world. It was about the danger of forgetting who you are. And now you remember. You were born for this moment. You were born to feel, to awaken, to witness, to speak, even when your voice trembles, especially then. You stand, not because the conversation is over, but because something deeper has begun. Jung watches you with quiet approval. He knows you are no longer just a seeker. You are now a bearer of light. You walk away changed, not because someone gave you answers, but because someone gave you back to yourself. And as you leave the room, you hear his voice one last time.